Hi everyone, I'm Michelle from Michelle's Midheaven, and today I'm going to share a natal chart which has a Contra Antiscia that has an interesting story to tell. If you're not sure what a Contra Antiscia is, don't worry, I'll explain it. But first, let's take a look at this chart. Let me pull up the chart on the screen for you. Here we are. This is the natal chart of Barbara Hutton. This is one of the charts I use for the mystery chart practice that I offer to students, but it contains such a beautiful example of a Contra Antiscia that I wanted to share it with you. Barbara Hutton was an American heiress and socialite. She was like the Paris Hilton of her day, you could say. And her father was the retail tycoon Frank Woolworth. And this is why Barbara became one of the wealthiest women in the world. And she did her best to spend all of her money as well. She was known to give away money to complete strangers. But we can see that her son, which will tell us something about her life story, revolves around other people's money in the 8th house, right? And she had no less than 7 marriages. How about the ruler Venus, ruler of the 7th with Jupiter, huh? All right. Now, there is a lot to unpack in this chart, but the part of her life I wanted to talk about today is the death of her mother, because this is going to bring in a Contra Antiscia. Barbara was only 4 years old when her mother passed, and it happened when transiting Saturn was in Cancer, applying to an opposition to the natal moon. And generally, the moon will represent the mother figure in the person's chart. So transiting Saturn was probably harmful to the moon or to the mother. Simultaneously, the other malefic planet transiting Mars was also in a tight square to the moon. So those would have been very difficult transits, and I would see those as having to do with her mother passing away. It was Barbara who actually discovered her mother's body, and this was obviously a traumatizing event. Now, with such a traumatizing event as this one, we should be able to see it in the natal chart as well, without any transits in the natal promise. So where would we see it? Well, there's a whole sign superior sextile from Mars, the malefic contrary to the sect, but that would hardly be enough. Mars, however, is in the house of death, of course, and it's also ruling the 8th house. So what kind of news is Mars going to bring to the moon from its position in the 8th house? Death is a possibility, right? But we need a little more testimony, though. A sextile just doesn't seem strong enough. And there is another testimony. The moon here is at the end of the sign of Capricorn. And since the moon is a very fast-moving planet, we can say that the moon is about to change signs. But what happens if the moon changes signs? It is going to ingress into Aquarius, where it will immediately connect with the god of death, which is Saturn, through a mutually applying trine. I say mutually applying because Saturn is retrograde and they're actually moving towards each other. Death is, of course, an important natural signification of Saturn, and the moon changing signs will also change the moon's relationship to Mars, who would then be making a square to the moon instead of a sextile. And that's more impressive. Mars would then be in a dominant position as it would be in a superior square. So those are definitely some clues that could explain a death in the family. But then my eye fell on this Contra Antiscia. The moon is in a Contra Antiscia with Saturn. And this piqued my curiosity because Whenever we see an Antiscia or Contra Antiscia in the chart, it means that there is something hidden, something that is secretive. And I'll tell you all about it. But first, I want to take a minute to explain what I mean with Contra Antiscia for those who are unfamiliar with this technique. So Contra Antiscia, or Counter Antiscia, as they're sometimes called, are mirroring points that are formed across the axis of the equinox. So you see the equinoctial axis over here. It extends from 0 Aries, 0 degrees of Aries, which is the point of the spring equinox, to 0 degrees of Libra, which indicates the fall equinox. And I'd like to pretend that I'm sort of folding the chart on this line of the axis. And if we would fold the chart in two on this line, these signs would in fact touch and overlap one another, you could say. So the sign of Pisces would sit on the sign of Aries, Aquarius on Taurus, Capricorn on Gemini. These signs are mirroring. Sagittarius is mirroring Cancer. Scorpio is mirroring Leo and vice versa. And finally, Libra and Virgo are mirroring signs. So all of these couples that you see here might contain planets that mirror one another. In other words, planets that might be in Contra Antiscia. While Contra Antiscia are mirror points across the axis of the equinox, Antiscia, by contrast, are mirror points that are formed across the axis of the solstice, which extends from 0 degrees Cancer to 0 degrees Capricorn. Same principle, different axis. Now, what is important here is that these Contra Antiscia are exact points, and the planets must mirror one another very, very precisely, which means that, for example, a planet that is at 2 degrees Pisces over here, its exact mirror point would be at 28 degrees Aries if we fold the chart in two across the equinox axis. In other words, the degrees of the mirroring planets should add up to 30 degrees, the amount of degrees that is held by an entire sign. So here we have our Contra Antiscia. Saturn is the mirror point or Contra Antician of the moon and vice versa. As you can see, the moon is at 28 degrees and 50 minutes Capricorn, and Saturn is in the mirroring sign of Gemini at exactly 1 degree and 18 minutes. This qualifies, if we add these numbers up, this qualifies as a very tight Contra Antiscia. Their sum is 30 degrees. And this makes the relationship between the moon and Saturn extra special, you could say. So how do we interpret this condition? We can look at Contra Antiscia as a secretive opposition. As I said, there is something hidden or secretive about it. Well, let's return to Barbara's mother's death. Officially, her mother died of mastoiditis, which is basically a massive infection that happens somewhere behind the ear area. But there is nothing secretive about that, right? Well, lo and behold, apparently rumor persists that she did not die of this infection, and that conversely, she committed suicide. She was rumored to have been desperate and depressed about her husband having romantic affairs, and people close to her insisted that she had actually poisoned herself. And poison, my friends, is another signification of the planet Saturn. Well, does the fact of the Contra Antiscia really mean that she committed suicide and that it was kept secret? Well, I don't know. I don't know because Contra Antiscia are secretive, but it's a possibility. All right, that is what I got for you today. I hope this example was helpful. Please let me know what you think in the comments and tell me what else you can see in this chart. Was it an infection? Was it a suicide? Or was it murder? Just kidding. All right, thank you so much for watching and don't forget to subscribe and give me a like. Bye for now. Thank you.